Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about Module 6. And again, congratulations on coming to the last module. It's a great achievement and I hope you're proud of it coming this far into mentorship training. It's definitely a long journey and there are many different tasks and obstacles that are coming in between you when completing the assignments or completing the modules. And so, this is something definitely to be proud of. And today's module, nevertheless, is about the dynamics that are involved in mentoring. And so mentoring is definitely a very complex process that requires a lot of social training. I would say like this is more or less like being able to control the dynamics of mentoring is something that is one of the most fundamental and essential parts of this entire program. So it's entirely focused on mentoring, the task that you're assigned with, and you in that role, in that capacity as the mentor. So mentoring and you. So welcome guys, welcome back. My name is Mohammed Khan. You have already seen the module 2 video, so you definitely know somewhat of how my lectures go. I know that the last one was somewhat long, but this one should be relatively shorter. Hopefully at least. So I am the senior mentor of mentorship training. I used to be the second senior mentor of mentorship training, but now I am the senior mentor of mentorship training. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me or Lydia, and you can do it through our email, or you can message us through Discord. If you would like a faster response, we can do it through Discord. You can always send us an email as well. Expect a response within, I would say, around about 1 to 3 business days. But I do definitely look at the email almost every day. There are some days which I don't, but I will generally look through the emails. So, but either way works fine. We should be responsive to both. So let's get back to mentoring. So the first slide is about building bridges. So as a mentor, you are expected to be building a bridge. And the metaphor that I've used is an actual bridge. So you're bridging essentially 2 parts, right? It's like you as a mentor and as a mentee, but you both symbolize 2 different things. And as a mentor, as someone who's been more experienced, going to the ANSA, being a student at the college, you know quite a bit more. And it's just through experience. Like, it's not necessarily about like whether or not you're academically smarter than your mentee. It's not necessarily anything with regards to that. It's just that given that you have that experience, you are more or less qualified to be able to say, this is what I should have done. This is what I could have done, right? And knowing that, just, having that experience alone makes you not necessarily, I would say, qualified to be a mentor, but definitely gives you an edge because you feel like you could have taken those risks either now or at an earlier point. So your goal essentially is to make your mentee a bit more comfortable with taking those risks and challenges. Because when we entered the college, one of the reasons why we didn't necessarily take those risks and challenges, which built up to regret, is essentially not necessarily the only reason, but one of the main reasons is because of the fact that we are in a totally different environment, in a totally different setting. And so we don't necessarily know how to take them, or more or less, if we feel confident enough in ourselves to take them. So this is a key part, right? So the mentee who's coming in, who's almost in most circumstances a new student, it's either in their first or second quarters, and they want to be more involved. They want to be more active on campus. And that's usually something that you'll see from a lot of your mentees. One of the reasons why they're coming to this program is because they're kind of looking to build connections here. And building connections is easier when you do it on an individual basis. Like that's how we essentially make friends. But doing it on a larger level, being part of a community, being part of an organization is going to definitely take some risks, because instead of having to build a connection with one person, you're building a connection with a lot of people, and definitely with a common mission, with a common goal, with a common purpose. And so there's so many different factors that are involved here. And that just makes someone who's already new, who's already shy and hesitant from just being completely out of the game. So your main job would be to build that bridge. And because we can always provide resources, we can always provide them with adequate information, but being able to have them take that leap, whereas they can use that information and act upon it, is something that's quite important. Because if you can provide someone with meaningful information, like a counselor can easily do that as well. But your job as a mentor is to push them, right? So there's a lot, and also there's also something that I would like to note out is that even as a mentor, you're not necessarily expected to know everything. And there's definitely people who are much more knowledgeable about a particular topic than you are at the campus, right? So even being, from my personal experience, even being part of student governments, I would say that my advisors know much, much more than I do. So the fact of the matter is that there are people that are more knowledgeable than you. But as a mentor, you are a student who is pushing your fellow student to really take that, to really act upon it, to really guide them throughout that process. Because an adult can't necessarily do that. A counselor cannot do that. A counselor can only provide a sheet of paper and say, like, here are the different requirements. These are the classes you should take to transfer to a different college. This is what you would need to get either a certain agreement with a particular UC. And so that's essentially their role and their position, and that's their limitations as well. And while you have some limitations as well, your biggest advantage is really making and establishing that bridge. So let's just go a little bit briefly throughout the different points. So yes, like as you have mentioned, make them more comfortable with taking risks and challenges. Of course, they can be particularly shy and hesitant, and that's more or less due to their lack of familiarity with the college. So they're lacking familiarity. They're, as I mentioned before, in a different setting. So, I mean, even if you think about it from the perspective that you're coming from, like, for example, like high school, right? If you're a local student coming from high school and then you're entering into a college, it's a different setting. You have so many thousands of people. And I know I'm saying the word quite a lot, but to understand the transition between one place to another place, especially when that symbolizes, a lot more to an individual, it's something that can really be a turning point in anyone. So you just need to push them forward and don't necessarily make them uncomfortable. Like, you don't need to push them to do something that you can see that they don't want to necessarily do. That's not exactly that's not at all what I'm talking about. What I would like to see you do is essentially see that if they have, like, for example, like a particular major. So let's go down to the fourth point. And of course, if you go into the previous one, yes, they have the right to refuse you at all times. You can push them, but know that they have the right to refuse. But one thing I would particularly say is that there are people that just refuse, and they will keep on refusing. But you need to be able to see in which manner will they be convinced. If you feel like they are eventually going to be convinced. So it's like there's a lot of social considerations. When your friend tells you no, in many cases that simply means no. But if you know that they really do want something, it's quite important to see whether or not there's a potential way of encouraging them to do so. Subconsciously, latently, that's something that you would like to particularly think about and consider and formalize within your approach to them. So, as I mentioned here, it's best if you feel like your mentee is interested in doing something, but they're just not willing to, that they don't have the motivation to do so, then you can really try like a smaller scale approach in the beginning. So, for example, let's say they're a business major. So I've used the example of a business admin major over here. So if they're in this major, then you would be kind of considering challenges that are related to business admin. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be concentrated on this major, but Something in relation to that. So let's say first you can introduce them to a business case competition. There are many case competitions. I believe that Jan's is holding one soon as well. The business village, I believe. And so then there's also like case competitions that have always been held at Foothill. So it's something to really see. So like this is a smaller scale challenge. And if they're hesitant in doing this, then you can really push them to do this. And then afterwards, progressively make it a little bit harder. So let's say let's give them a full-time commitment, which I put over here as a Kansas Student Government Finance or Flea Market Committee intern. So that would be like a more of a full-time commitment where they would be spending a considerable number of hours a week working on a particular project. So, one is a case competition and one is something of a longer term commitment. So essentially start off small and then you can always go up big. But at the end of the day, you are that bridge. And it's important to really be able to have your fellow passenger, which is your mentee, cross that bridge. And I think that's one of the main things. And one thing that I would like you to take away from this slide in particular is that people can always provide information, but while information can easily be seen as true, not many people act upon it. And it's your job to have your mentee act upon it if you feel like it's in their best interest to do so. So another thing that I think everyone knows this is a core value, but something to stress upon, and I know that this has probably been mentioned in also like module 2 as well, but it's worth going over as well. So empathy. Empathy is essentially trying to comprehend the struggles of someone, even if you haven't necessarily gone through them yourself. And this is a value that I wish would be more commonplace. And it's sad to see that sometimes people don't necessarily have it. So even though someone has gone through something which you haven't personally experienced, you should still be able to understand like the emotions that at least not try to necessarily understand, but at least be willing to see why that person is undergoing the emotions that they are, right? So if someone has had something that has happened to them, you should be able to kind of understand. I mean, of course, this will take like, some social expertise, some grasping of the particular event, but, trying to understand why that person is responding to you or acting towards you in a particular manner. So empathy. One thing that I would like to say is that if you there are many situations where a mentee might tell you something and you might be questioning as to why they feel like this is a particular problem. Now, as a student who has probably might not have encountered that situation, or who has successfully undergone them and not even considered that problem as a challenge, then you are yourself in a position of privilege that way, that you have not only may have not considered it a problem, but you may have never even encountered it in the first place. So understand that you're a little bit privileged in that regard. So empathy would require you to really see that, yes, this, while may not have been a challenge to me, or I might not have seen it on my educational journey at Yansa, but at the end of the day, this is something that's very possible for that person to have encountered and have gone through, or is currently going through. So it is something that you should see. You're privileged to be in this position that you are. And then it's your job to really help your mentee go through that in a manner that you feel is best for them. And also another thing is that if your mentee tells you a story whereas you feel like might not be particularly applicable to like the answer itself, I think it's best to hear it as well. Because many mentees, I mean, if they're coming to a college for the first time and they haven't had any interactions with, or like haven't had many interactions with people at the campus itself, then they would like to at least tell someone about the problems that they're facing. So it's best to hear it out. But then also, again, you can always set expectations for your mentee, like that I am willing to listen, but know that I cannot necessarily help you with a problem that's not necessarily related to the answer itself. But it's always nice to at least see from your mentee that they're willing to share to you. And I would always encourage people to hear them out, but you can always, set that as an expectation in the first place. So another point is that at a community college, many people don't come from a linear kindergarten to community college pathway. So in that case, the backgrounds that many of your mentees might have are not necessarily linear. So it's important not to judge someone based upon that. And it's also important to see that just because they don't have that linearity in their life, that causes you to be like, why couldn't they have done it in a much conversely in a more linear manner? But at the end of the day, people have had lives that are not necessarily as straightforward as you would like to see someone have. And as a mentor, you're not necessarily supposed to judge people. You're not actually at all supposed to judge people. So it's your job to help them out. And one of the biggest enemies of empathizing with someone is judging others. And by judging others, the more you judge someone, the less likely you will be able to empathize with them. And that goes into the next one. As if like, why are they complaining about a particular situation? Or that I personally found myself in tougher situations and had more resolve. So some people might be complaining about problems where you feel like this is not even really a problem to complain about, right? Or have had to go through much more tougher situations. And in that case, I mean, it can be hard to hear something, as always, when you find that it's not even something to really complain about to you. And that has happened, I believe, to everyone at one point or another, whenever they're talking with someone, either a family member or a friend or a sibling. And in that case, you should always still see it from their perspective. There's a difference in your backgrounds, right? There's a difference in the experiences that you have had at this particular college. So understand that you come from you have lived two different lives, and that has given you a separate set of experiences, which you're building your idea of toughness and easiness around, and what you consider a challenge as well. So you need to be able to see it also from their end as well. They may have not had that many challenges. And so a challenge that you might have seen as something this is a minute problem in your own life could be reasonably big for them. Now, one thing that I'd like to mention about this, because I do believe empathy is relatively straightforward, but it does need to be stressed, because without empathy, mentoring essentially does definitely fall apart. One thing that I would like to say at the very end, so a lot of people confuse sympathy with empathy. Now, sympathy is requiring you to build bridges between your shared experiences. Now, while it's often nice to have kind of an idea about what someone's going through based upon what you have personally gone through, and that's always best if you can bridge it. So I know a lot of people will try to say that, so, oh, I have also been through something similar, or I can also relate to that. Whereas it's best to relate to something in some way because you need some form of relativity um, to be able to answer to something or conceptualize something. But at the end of the day, sympathy is requiring you to build a bridge between those shared experiences, whereas many times you don't have them, right? Your mentee could have undergone something that you have personally never experienced and don't know anything about. So understand that there's something that could be entirely different, where there's essentially a reasonably big divide. And in that case, you need to be able to see it from their perspective without having to see how can I personally relate to this? Because in many cases, you simply can't. To the enormity of the problem, to what the problem even is in the first place. So I would encourage people that if you can sympathize, then you can sympathize. But at the end of the day, in many cases with your mentee, you're going to be, and I would like you to try empathizing with them instead. So here are some tips on empathizing. So I've had two main tips, and I believe that, most people can really understand empathy because it's definitely a core human value. And it's definitely one of the ways we make friends as well, like human connections. So the first is conceptualizing your mentee situation. So I previously mentioned about sympathy. Now, it's nice to have some relative position as to where your mentee is coming from, right? So based upon your personal experiences. But try to visualize it, try to understand it, comprehend it. Now, should you ask your mentee more questions with regards to that situation if they feel uncomfortable about it? And the answer is obviously no. If they feel uncomfortable with sharing more details than they already have had done, so then it's not a position from which you can ask more questions. And what I would encourage you to do instead is just try to visualize it the best that you can, and see it a little bit from their point of view. Since you have already shared a bit about your backgrounds, there's not I would feel like it would be relatively hard for someone not to visualize or conceptualize someone else's situation. So I believe that this is somewhat self-explanatory, but just see it from their point of view. It doesn't even require anything further. And in that case, you're already going to be building a bridge just from the thoughts that arise in your head. So then the next part is active listening. So active listening is essentially hearing. Now, one thing I find very interesting is that people listen to others, but one of the key things about listening is paying your full undivided attention to someone. And as I would say, you would need to dedicate your heart, ears, and eyes to someone in order to really, truly listen. Because if one of the things are missing, then you're essentially, I would say, not listening. And while the definition of listening definitely includes just hearing someone's words, whatever they're speaking, but to actively listen in this proper definition would be to dedicate all three elements and aspects of yourselves to them. So, and in that case, I mean, the mentee will realize it from the beginning. And so they will realize that, and they will be willing to share you more information. So another thing that I would like to discuss is power dynamics. Now, power dynamics are something that is a little bit hard to explain. So, but I would say that this is also something that I think if you really think about your personal connections from a much more deeper level, I think you can somewhat understand the gist of what this word means, or at least this term means. So mentoring definitely does contain a power dynamic between you and your mentee, like in a boss-employee relationship. It's not necessarily like that comparatively, but there is still a power dynamic between you and your mentee. So your mentee in most pairings is a relatively new student who's trying to understand how to best utilize the resources that the college has to provide. And you are someone that is already familiar with that information. So as someone who's already familiar with that information, and your mentee being someone who's relatively new and has at least less information than you do about the college that you're currently both students at, then you do have the edge upon them in some ways by having this information, by having this knowledge. So this creates definitely an imbalance, right? Because you, by having more information, know more. You have more opportunities. You have more pathways, right? More pathways are definitely more open to you, and as well as you have the initiative and drive to go upon them. And being able to use those pathways to navigate, like I've mentioned, the college's academic, extracurricular, and social environments is something that's key here for you as the mentor in having that edge. Now, when I mentioned the edges in a relationship, now it's not necessarily about dominating one or the other, and it's nothing in relationship in relation to that. It's more or less about what happens in between two people, that one person is definitely what you could say, I would say more inexperienced and someone who's more experienced. And it's the same thing that you see from a parent and maybe one of their, I mean, I wouldn't actually like to give that analogy, but I would like to say that it just happens in many different, and I wouldn't also want to compare it to a boss-employee relationship, but it just happens to be like that. And so what I would say is, while it's sorry about the brief pause. But what I would like to say is, while this is beneficial to you, because since they're being dependent upon you, they will be able to be more attentive and responsive towards you. And then because they're more eager to learn that information from you. And this will facilitate the mentee's eagerness to complete things that are ultimately beneficial to them. But this can also lead to toxicity, because while they are more attentive and responsive towards you, if you are essentially like someone that puts up this barrier by having this experience, this progress about the college, or you can definitely be seen as domineering, unrelatable, and someone that they would not be feel comfortable sharing information with. And they will find someone who's more accessible and relatable instead. So the idea is that, yes, they will be more willing to learn from you, but at the same time, depending upon essentially how you present yourself to them, you can be seen as something entirely different, as someone that they cannot depend upon. So because of the gap between the mentee and the mentor in the information that they have, and what the mentee's impression of the mentor being. So that can definitely create something, whereas the mentee would not feel comfortable with you being their mentor in the first place. And this comes really down to being more accessible, being more relatable. And so while there are some benefits with that, there are definitely some downsides which you would need to navigate kind of on a thin line. So here are some tips on that. So the first step is to lower your personal guard. Now, it's not necessarily meaning that, and in all three of these tips, I would say that a lot of them require you to essentially bring yourself a little bit down, if you essentially know what I mean. But what I would mainly say is that you would like to kind of make yourself more open to talking and discussing things that in a more casual manner, in a more friendly manner. Now, you're not necessarily looking to replace their friend, right? You're not looking to be their best friend, but it does always help in any relationship, whether it's a working relationship, whether it's anything in general. Just make it a little bit more casual. So this goes on to the next tip, casualizing the conversation. Now, you are a mentor in the first place. You are there. You are someone who's guiding them throughout their course at the end. So, and as someone who is in a position like that, you're not necessarily supposed to casualize everything, right? Because you want them to take you seriously, and the information and resources and assistance. At least you want to present it in a more serious manner at times so that they can receive it seriously as well. So, but there are times when you can attempt to make it a little bit more casual, whereas they will be more willing to listen, whereas they would actually find the conversation more engaging, and to the point where they can feel like they actually can do this based upon the attitude that you provide them with. And another thing is using more passive language. So instead of saying like, you should do it, just use more language where it's a little bit more passive, a little bit more encouraging, and always remind them that while I am providing this information, and not necessarily always, I would say, because it's sometimes nice to have, like I said before, a lot of this is dependent upon the interval that you are at in the conversation. But you can say that, like, instead of saying that I want you to do this, you can say, I believe that this is in your best interest to do this. Or you can say that I believe that this is something that definitely fits you. And you can always provide a reason as to why you're recommending this, right? So providing recommendation kind of negates the commutative, the imperative aspect of your statement as well, because you're giving a reason as to why you believe it's in their best interest as well. And that concludes our presentation. So any questions or concerns, you can always email us as well. This presentation is more or less about the dynamics of mentoring. So if you found this encouraging, you can always just send a message on if anything that you'd like to learn more about with regards to this. But I would also like to send my congratulations again to all of our mentors who successfully completed their mentorship training. This is module 6 being this being the last module, essentially. I would like to wish everyone here luck on their future journeys. Thank you so much.